Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ohio EPA's 2022 Virtual Compliance Assistance Conference. My name is Bill Narodsky, and I'm with the Division of Environmental Response and Revitalization here at Ohio EPA, and I will be moderating the Got Hazardous Waste session. Ohio EPA's 2022 Virtual Compliance Assistance Conference has 24 sessions over 2 weeks. This is today's second of 3 sessions focusing on the hazardous waste regulations. Registration information and a conference agenda are located on the Ohio EPA's conference web page. We hope you are able to join us for additional conference sessions. Please remember, it's never too late to sign up for the next conference session, and all sessions are being recorded for you to view later. Before we get started, we would like to point your attention to one of today's environmental things to consider. Some businesses are subject to closure requirements when they shut down. The goal of the Cessation of Regulated Operations, or CRO program, is to prevent threats to human health and the environment that are created when business owners and operators abandon businesses where chemicals are produced, used, stored, or handled. CRO program requirements include submitting information about the chemicals and waste to Ohio EPA, maintaining security, and posting signage at facility location. You can scan the QR code on this slide to learn more about the CRO program and its requirements. And with that, I would like to turn it over to our presenter, Dan DeMeo. Dan works in the Central District Office of Ohio EPA. He is part of the Division of Environmental Response and Revitalization as a hazardous waste inspector. His job duties include inspecting facilities that are very small to very large in size, enforcing hazardous waste permits, and answering hazardous waste complaints. Dan has been in his position for almost 10 years and has a Bachelor's of Science in Environmental Science from the University of Dubuque. The session's behind-the-scene subject matter experts are Tammy Heffelfinger, Zach Kabelin, and Christy Shipley from the Hazardous Waste Compliance Assurance section. Let's turn it over to our presenter now. Here's Dan.
Thank you very much, Bill. This is Daniel DeMeo with Ohio's Environmental Protection Agency, talking about Got Hazardous Waste. So you just heard a little bit about me, and now I would like to hear a little bit about who's in my audience today. So we're going to start off today with a quick poll. So our first poll question of the day is, how long have you been in the environmental health and safety role during your career? Please select one of the following answers here. We've got less than 1 year, 1 to 3 years, 4 to 6 years, 7 to 10 years, or greater than 10 years. Again, please select one of these responses.
Okay, it looks like almost 80% of you have responded. For those of you who have not yet responded, please go ahead and submit your responses, and we will be closing the poll in a few moments. Okay. We are now going to close the poll, and let me share the results with everyone.
Okay, looking good. We've got a lot of veterans here with us today, a couple other smatterings throughout, smaller percentages for the other amounts. So hopefully with today's training should be mostly a refresher for the majority of you if you've had to deal with hazardous waste rules in the past. Otherwise, I hope to enlighten as many of you as I can to the regulations around evaluating hazardous waste. Thank you very much, Bill.
You're welcome.
Perfect. Great. First polling question done, and we can get into the presentation here. So the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, RCRA, is RCRA in short, houses the household hazardous waste. I'm sorry, all of the hazardous waste rules, including household hazardous waste. So we're going to mainly be talking about hazardous waste regulations, how to evaluate. First thing to know is that RCRA is a cradle to grave management system. So that is from the very beginning when the waste is first generated all the way through to its eventual recycle or death, discarded, depending on where it goes. It should be managed properly, and we need to know what we have to manage it at each step of the way. How do we do that? We do that with waste evaluations. So this is the cornerstone of RCRA. This is also my main topic for today. And like I said, I'm hoping to teach you what's excluded, what's included, evaluation methods, different listings, and when to reevaluate your material. And today we'll go through making waste determinations for characteristic waste and listed waste, and I'll also walk you through some flowcharts to help you guide you in this process. Feel free to ask questions, as Bill stated, in the chat, and our lovely panel of experts will answer them as they can. Again, if there's any questions that are not answered, we'll be sure to send you a follow-up email. Okay, waste evaluation requirements. We've got a nice dumpster here, and just want to remind everyone that you should not be throwing away anything unless you have confirmed and demonstrated that it is not a hazardous waste. Again, that is confirmed and demonstrated. So you should have several pieces of paper documentation saying exactly what you have. If it's a Gatorade bottle, to some personal protective equipment, to some drum of whatever sludge, you should know exactly what you have at all times. Waste evaluation. So under Ohio's laws, all waste must be evaluated by the generator. Who is the generator? It's any person or site who act or process or procedures cause a hazardous waste to become subject to the hazardous waste rules. So by a person, this could be Bob working for facility A, who is taking his gloves off and putting them in the trash can. Bob has generated a waste. The facility itself, facility A, is throwing out that waste with a big pickup truck, and they've got it scheduled. They're generating the waste. So yeah, it could be individual. If it's an individual working for a facility, it can be the facility. And there are little bullet points here. For material to be a hazardous waste, it also must be a waste. So we want to make sure it's hitting first the waste regulations and then our smaller division into our hazardous waste rules. Again, what is a waste? A waste is any material that will be discarded, disposal, burning, or storing and treating in lieu of discard. I want to point out the word discarded here. This is something that you are getting rid of. You've no longer a need for it. If you still have a need for it, then it'll continue to be in your facility's process while you're making products or whichever you have. So this is when you no longer need it. It's going off. It's being burnt. It could be something that you plan to treat, maybe to meet LDRs, but you haven't treated it yet. So just keep that in mind. Discarded waste. Waste is also any material that will be recycled by being used on the ground, burned for energy, or speculatively accumulated on site. So again, waste, anything you want to get rid of, being discarded, or things specifically being recycled to the ground, burned for energy, or it's being speculatively accumulated. What is not a waste? We've got excluded waste. So these are wastes specifically defined in the rule as not being a waste or a hazardous waste. We also have material that will be reused or reclaimed. So say I've been to a place that makes styrofoam cups. They're using styrene. The one point in their process, they're looking what's coming off the line. It seems to be misshapen, not quite useful for selling to customers. Their process allows them to use the styrene at that point, move it back to the beginning, remelt it down, reprocess it again, get a better looking product. That's being reused. They're going back into their own internal systems. They still have a purpose for that material. It's not being discarded yet. So therefore, they do not have a waste. There are some hazardous waste evaluation tools you can use. So these tools are the Ohio Hazardous Waste Rules, your lab analysis of a waste, your generator knowledge through process inputs, information from vendors, suppliers, or information such as you can find on your safety data sheets, SDSs or MSDSs if you've been around a bit longer. You need to make sure you document your evaluations and keep them on file. If a regulator like myself was come to your facility, I'm going to ask you to have that sort of information, and I'm going to expect you to provide it to me either in a physical form. If you can bring it up electronically, that's great too. You just need to have it kept somewhere. Jumping back to the Ohio waste rules, you can find an entire list of excluded wastes in our rule set there. You can find them under 3745-5104. That's exclusions. And there's things that are excluded are household hazardous waste, landfill, leachate, agricultural waste. So if you've got one of those, there's more listed there. You know that you don't have a hazardous waste, that you do still have a waste. You're like, oh, it's not listed here. Okay, so maybe I should get some lab analysis done, or let me look into some of these generator knowledge, see if I can figure it out that way before I'm spending money on the labs. So knowledge-based determination, this is our generator knowledge. So generators must have sufficient information to make a determination. Gotta have all the facts. And this determination is required to be correct. Again, I want to point you to that. Required to be correct. So that means accurate. That means you need to know exactly what you have. Is it hazardous waste? Is it not hazardous waste? What type of hazardous waste is it? You can figure this out through process knowledge. So analysis of the raw materials. So you're buying it from, you're buying clay from Big Brick, and they're telling you it's coming in with this type of breakdown and this is the components inside it. And you're like, great, I've got this material. It's going to go through my process. Maybe I'll have some of that material come through the end. Then we've got engineering production data. So you know your process, you know what's being moved through, how you're producing your products, and thus how waste is generated at your site. Maybe you've got a material that is going to pick something up along. You're like, oh, I'm going to add this in, and that's a little bit corrosive. So maybe that corrosive listing is going to carry through all the way to the end. But you'll know, because that's your process. You've been pushing material through, or at least studying how it all works. So you can use that information as well to let you know if you have a waste or hazardous waste. Again, your SDS is here. Review them. Make sure if they tell you that it should carry this waste code, make sure you're using that waste code. A lot of times I see SDSs say to contact your state to see if it is a hazardous waste in that state. It's a great recommendation. You can feel free to reach out to us at Ohio EPA, see if there is something specific with your process or your material that may innately be hazardous. Previous tests from other locations using substantially similar process. So don't reinvent the wheel here. If you are painting cars and you notice the other 15 shops in the city that all paint cars all are calling their discarded acetone from cleaning their paint guns as a hazardous waste, then you too should probably be calling your discarded acetone as hazardous waste. So those are the types of things you want to look into. And again, I want you to make sure you are documenting which ones you have, which ones you're trying to use, and what you have going forward. You're like, oh, well, because it's a very similar process to these other companies, that's what we're doing. That's why we believe this is a hazardous waste. It's very nice to see that written out. Takes like 2 sentences. Put in a best management practice, that sort of thing. Keep it on file again. Perfect. So that was knowledge-based determinations. Analysis-based determinations. Simplest answer here, sample. Things to watch out, though, when you're going to a lab, sending the samples to them, is it a representation of the waste? So you want to make sure you're sampling when the waste is generated, not when it's been sitting around or after it's been treated using some other means of treatment. We want to sample it right when it's generated. And then say you generate a half a drum of material. We don't want to take just that first inch of material and send that off to be sampled. We want to make sure we're getting a nice representative sample of everything in that drum. If things are starting to, separate into different phases, we want to make sure you get a full sample of that and send that off to get properly analyzed. And then, what's the proper method used to analyze the sample? So you're not going to do a corrosivity test on something that you believe is ignitable. We want to make sure we're using the correct tests for the correct material, and make sure you're using the proper analysis for that. I know there's some updates to things for different ignitability testing. So just make sure you're using the proper ones that are suggested and useful for that. Another tool to use is our flowcharts here. So is your waste excluded? Is your you need to know answers to that, and then following that, is your waste listed? And then does your waste exhibit a characteristic? So excluded, listed, characteristics. We'll follow that simple flow chart and should tell us if we have a hazardous waste. Excluded waste. Again, these are wastes not subject to hazardous waste regulations. You can find them in the Ohio Administrative Code, OAC, Rule 3745-5104. Examples of this, again, NPDES discharge, shredded circuit boards, excluded scrap metal, household hazardous waste, those sort of things. And there's, again, more on the list. I suggest you to follow the link, give it a quick read through. So that was our first bubble in our flowchart. The second bubble, is it listed? So does it appear on the F, K, P, or U listings? And some states have state listed waste. So is it listed there as well? Again, I would advise you to check to see if a material is listed as a hazardous waste for a state listing at the facility you're generating, or the location you're generating it at, and at the location you're sending it to. As well as every state it's passing through in between. If you're a transporter and you're transporting hazardous material, you should know which states are going to call it what. Just keep yourself safer while you're dealing with these hazardous wastes. Knowledge is key here, folks. So we're going to walk through these listed hazardous wastes, and our first list is the F listed waste. These are non-specific waste sources. You can find them in OAC Rule 3745-5131. And this basically means that a hazardous waste can be generated from any type of manufacturing process. So our spent solvents, for example, here, they're F001 through F005. You've got your spent electroplating operation waste, F006 through F009. I'm going to show you a little chart here. There we go. Okay, so our example here for F listing table, things I want to point out to you, this is F004 and F005. Both are spent non-halogenated solvents. The differentiation is which specific chemicals are used in this process. So F004 gives us crucial, crucilic acid, and others. That if you read a bit more in here, are spent solvent mixtures or blends containing, before use, a total of 10% or more by volume of one or more of the above non-halogenated solvents. So again, this is what you've got. You're using these. Oh, I've got this spent material. It's F004. Or maybe I'm not using those ones. Look down. Oh, I've got MEK, methyl ketone. That's under F005. So figure out what process you have and then which specific components or compounds, chemicals you're using to find out which waste code you should be using. Also a fun little thing to look at and to be aware of, you have your hazard code on the far right here. We've got T for toxic, I for ignitable. So that'll help you as well as determine what other codes you should be putting on the containers for this, because we're going to want to see your hazardous waste codes listed on all your waste containers, as well as any other stickers, placardings that should be there. So make sure we also pay attention to these hazard codes. Our second set of lists, we've got K-listed waste. So these are specific waste sources. They can be found in OAC 3745-5132. And this basically means waste is only generated from specific type of industry and process given in the listed description. These are very specific waste streams. Examples here, we've got spent pot liners from primary aluminum, that's K088. You got iron and steel production, your electric arc furnace dust, K061, your spent pickle liquor, K062. So again, very specific things. We're going to look at some examples of that here. So our K listing table here, if we look at our waste codes on the left, you got wood preservatives. Again, this is the bottom sediment sludge from the treatment of wastewaters from wood preservings processes that use creosote and or pentachlorophenol. This gives you another toxic hazard code over here. That's just K001. If we look at your inorganic pigments, K002, 3, and 4, this is your wastewater treatment sludge from the production of, and you've got, look at this, we got chrome yellow here, and then again at K04, we've got zinc yellow. So two different yellows, but we've given us two very different codes, even though they're both yellow pigments. So again, very specific things. Make sure you know which one should apply to your material. So our last set here is our PNU listings. So this is discarded, keyword there. Commercial chemical products, PNU listed. You can find them in 5133. And they must be an unused commercial chemical product. So again, this is stuff that's mostly found, or at least I've seen it when a facility is doing a lab clean out. And like, oh, okay, well, we no longer are going to be using this, we're switching to this other compound. It's cheaper, it's newer, it's better, whatever. We've got a bunch of the old compounds sitting on the shelf. We're going to get rid of it. There's your unused, still in its original packaging maybe, that you are going to discard. Check to see if it is on the P or U listings. Things from the P list, you've got your copper cyanide, P029, your phosgene, P095. Some U listings are creosote and Lindane shampoo. So again, remember this is unused. Doesn't always have to be in its original container as long as it's before it's gone into some sort of processing, some type of manufacturing process. And again, you are discarding it. So you have no more use for it, sending it off for landfill or incineration or whatever. Sadly, no little charts for that one. Just make sure to follow the rule to see exactly what we have listed there. Okay, so now we've talked about our excluded waste, we've talked about our listed waste, and now we're going to talk about characteristics. Just a quick poll here. How many types of characteristic hazardous waste are there? Again, please select one answer of 2, 3, 4, or 5.
All right, I'm launching the poll now, and please make your selection. Okay, it looks like 75% of you have responded so far. Those of you who have not yet responded, please go ahead and submit your responses, and we will be closing the poll in a few moments. Okay, we're now going to close the poll. Let me share the results with everyone.
Perfect. Okay, so yeah, the answer is 4. That's what we're looking for. So 74, 75% of you, 3/4 of you are correct there. So thank you very much. The rest of you, like to say, we'll go over the 4 characteristic hazardous wastes here. So no worries, I'll give you all the specifics on them in just a bit. Okay, poll is closed. And yes, our 4 characteristic hazardous wastes, these are like the 4 wheels to our minivan of hazardous waste regulations. Now we've got our ignitable, corrosive, reactive, and toxic hazardous waste, and you can find them in 37, 45, 51, 21, 22, 23, and 24. So just follow right in order there for the one that you need to research, or really should be reading about all of them. But we'll get into each of them here in a sec. There we are. So ignitable hazardous waste. This is D001 waste code, and this is the one I come across most often in the field. This is the one I see at the majority of facilities, and that is your liquid that has a flash point of less than 104 degrees Fahrenheit, except solutions less than 24% alcohol by volume. This can be a ignitable compressed gas, solids that spontaneously ignite and burn vigorously. So watch those keywords. Oxidizers as defined by the Ohio Department of Transportation's rules. So make sure you are also looking at them. Again, the Department of Transportation's website there. And then some examples of that are your solvents, degreasers, and some metal swarfs. Next up, we've got our corrosive hazardous waste, D002. And that's an aqueous solution with a pH less than or equal to 2, or a pH greater than or equal to 12.5. This is a liquid that corrodes steel at a specific rate. I do not know the rate off the top of my head. It is some formula you've got to do with the surface area of the steel and the component that is touching it, how fast it is moving across that surface. So some math is involved, but there is a formula to go through to find out what that rate is for your material. Some examples of this are acids, alkaline cleaning fluids. I'm looking at you, bleach, and waste battery acids. Little note here. If we look back, this is a aqueous solution to give us our corrosives. So we're not going to have any corrosive solids. Next up, we have our reactive hazardous waste. That's D003. That's your explosive, unstable, reacts violently with water or generates a toxic gas. Examples of this are dynamite and our waste, peroxides, and ethers. So one thing with these, if you have a reactive waste, and I know majority of people have a little cove picked out for their hazardous waste storage sites. If you have a reactive waste, please store it away from anything it potentially react to. So a little bit of common sense there. Make sure that those drums or containers are up on some sort of like drum pallet to capture anything that could leak out of them, or they're in a separate like bermed area, so that if there was an accidental release of that material in your storage area, it's not creeping into something that it could react with, and the next thing you know, you have an explosion or a fire. So little safety precautions there. Please keep it a bit separated from your other wastes. And that is something that the fire marshals were also going to want to know a bit more about when you make your contingency plans, if you are in a large enough facility, to make sure that they're aware of these wastes specifically. And lastly, we have our toxic hazardous waste. That's your D004 through D043. Now notice our other categories were just one waste code. One waste code for ignitable, one waste code for corrosive, one waste code for reactive. In this, we've got a good slew here. That's because they're actually broken up into exactly which compound toxin they are. So this contains our toxic constituents equal to or above the regulatory levels. And that's our 8 metals. A lot of times you may hear somebody talk about your RCRA metals. These are the 8 they're talking about. There's also 32 organics. And this is primarily determined by your toxicity characteristic leaching procedure, so TCLP or TCLIP. You may hear that term used as well. And one thing to note about this TCLIP determination, this is when a material is sitting in a landfill setting. So how it breaks down, how it moves in a active landfill. So again, if you're having something else happen to your waste, this may not be the proper determination to do. Some examples here, we've got your electronic equipment. Most cathode ray tubes fall under this. You've got your spent foundry sand, some clay poker chips, certain waste pesticides, all can have toxic hazardous waste codes associated with them. We're going to get into some examples here. So here are our RCRA metals. So they cover your D004 to D0011. That's your arsenic, barium, cadmium, chromium, lead. See that one a ton. Mercury, selenium, and silver. So we've got, again, our constituent here, our contaminant at the second column. And then if we look at the far right, we have our regulatory level. So if you have something at this level or above, you will have a hazardous waste for that material. So you need to include that waste code. It may also be another waste code on top of it. It may carry another characteristic, or it could carry, say, an F0 listing because of the process it came from. So just be sure you have all of the hazardous waste numbers associated on your containers. I'll just give you guys another little sec to look over this. I really want to stress these regulatory levels because that's going to tell you if you have a hazardous waste for these metals specifically. Okay, so back to our flow chart. So let's walk through this. We talked about excluded waste. Is it excluded? Yes, not a hazardous waste. We don't got to worry about it anymore. Perfect. But what if we had to know? So we're looking down here. Does it appear on Ohio's EPA F, K, P, or U listing? Let's say it does. So then we have a listed hazardous waste. We're still not done yet. Does it have any hazardous waste characteristics? Because we need to know all about that waste. So if yes, then we've got both a listed and characteristic waste. It should carry both of those waste codes on that material. If it doesn't carry a characteristic, then that's fine. It's still hazardous waste here because it's listed. That's just one less set of numbers we have to worry about. But let's jump back a little bit more. So we have no excluded, no U listings. We then have to ask, is it a characteristic? Does it have a hazardous waste characteristic? If yes, again, there you go. You have a characteristic hazardous waste. Keep those numbers on it. If not, then we don't have a hazardous waste at all. So again, follow your flow chart. If you're hitting a red box, you should be doing something. Finding out some documentation, keeping that stuff on record. And again, to point back to a way earlier slide, facility generators need to know, they need to be able to have all the information to make an accurate determination for your waste. If you make an inaccurate one, it turns out that you were throwing something away that, or sending it off to a normal landfill, not a hazardous waste landfill, but a normal landfill because you were saying it's just a waste, not a hazardous waste. But with some analytical testing, we could have found out it is in fact a hazardous waste. Then you can find yourself on the wrong side of some enforcement cases. So you wind up with a 5211 violation for not properly evaluating your waste. No, nobody wants that. That's an automatic enforcement. I gotta send that inspection report upstairs to our team of lovely experts here. Most of them have dealt with enforcement cases before. So they have to weigh in. There's the potential for more fines that come with that, having to do some outreach. So really, you want to get this done. You want to have it done properly. I would, again, suggest you use as many tools as you can to have the proper evaluation for your material. That way, you don't have to accidentally find yourself in an enforcement case. So lastly here we have, how often do I have to recharacterize my waste? So we've talked about when to do it. Pretty obviously, the first time you've ever generated something, you need to know what you have. So you're going to run through your evaluation process, or if you hit one of these bullet points here. So when changes to the raw materials process or operations change. So basically, if you have any big changes, you're like, oh, we were using this pink pigment. Now we're going to switch over and use that red pigment. Is the red one going to potentially give us a hazardous waste. You're going to have to reevaluate there. Or maybe you were processing something through and there was a burner and no longer using the burner, using some, I don't know, drying something. Again, changing some major part, need to reevaluate. What if your waste sent to a different TSD, that's treatment storage disposal facility, for the first time? So you've been using, they're going to want to know what you're sending them. So if you're sending it to a TSD, they're going to want to know. So you're doing your first evaluations, but then maybe TSD over here decides that they have a better process to deal with what you have, or maybe they're a little bit cheaper or closer. I don't know. It's your first time you're sending it to them. You should again reevaluate your waste at that point. New analytical data is required by the TSD. So maybe something's changed on the TSD side. Maybe they've got a new process to dispose or manage your waste. So they may ask you to do get some more data into them. Questions arise during transportation or receipt of the waste. So again, wherever you're sending it to, could be a landfill, could be for some recycling process, could be to a TSD. If your receiving facility has some questions, they may ask you to reevaluate that waste stream. Questions arise through internal or external audits. So maybe your corporate has come down and done an audit and they're like, oh, we're thinking this may fall out of regulations because the regulations have changed and now this is no longer what it was classified as before. Or someone like me, an inspector, comes out and is like, ooh, take a second look at this. Maybe you didn't realize this waste code would still carry through. Or maybe if you treat it this way, the waste code falls off. So at which point you'd want to reevaluate after making some changes there. And then always, if any changes made by US EPA to the RCRA waste identification and classification rules. So if anything changes in the rules, make sure that you are reevaluating to be following the most up-to-date and accurate rules possible. Knowing what you have at all times is the main key here and point I'm trying to drive home, as I've probably repeated it way too much today. And time for our last poll of the day. For my presentation, and that's which district office should you contact for questions about hazardous waste at your facility? I assume the majority of you are here in Ohio. So I've listed out the different district offices and their phone numbers so that you can contact. This is their front desk line, the front office number. So you'll also have to, once you call in, let them know that you have a hazardous waste question so they can send you to the correct division. So we've got Northwest District Office, that's out in Bowling Green. You've got your Northeast District Office out in Twinsburg, your Central District Office here in Columbus, that's where I'm stationed, your Southwest District Office in Dayton, or your Southeast District Office in Logan.
Okay, I'm launching the poll now. Please let us know which district office you are using. Okay, it looks like 75% of you have responded so far. For those of you who have not yet responded, please go ahead and submit your responses, and we will be closing the poll in a few moments. All right, we're now going to go ahead and close the poll. Let me share the results with everyone.
Okay, it's a bit all over the place. We got majority of people here today in Twinsburg. Good numbers coming in for Columbus, Dayton area. Some other of you out in Bowling Green, and not too many, I guess, from Southeast today. But that's fine. Like I said, feel free to make sure you're reaching out to the district office closest to you, as those are most likely the inspectors that are going to be coming to do audits, do inspections, to find out, know your facility. We try to generate as much as a rapport with you guys as hopefully you are trying to generate with us. That way we're making the best decisions together on how to properly regulate all of your facilities. And then after you've talked to the district office, if it's a more technical or something that needs to be passed, hire up one of our compliance assistance professionals, may get involved to make a more thorough determination on waste stream. Yeah, let me go through. So I hope you all enjoyed the presentation. You were able to take away some sort of knowledge from it. I will now open the floor to some questions.
Thank you, Daniel. And as a reminder, you can still submit questions through the question pane. We will do our best to answer as many of the questions as possible. And if we don't answer your question during the Q&A portion, we will reach out to you via email following today's session. Okay, our first question is, does a waste derived from a hazardous waste listed solely for exhibiting a characteristic of ignitability, corrosivity, or reactivity remain a hazardous waste when it no longer exhibits a hazardous waste characteristic?
Okay, so good question. Basically, you're asking if something has a characteristic, what happens when that characteristic falls off? So if it is solely listed with ignitability, corrosive, or reactive, and I don't know, so you go through some treatment, it will in fact also if it loses that characteristic, it loses being called a hazardous waste. So like I said, you can't have a corrosive solid. So maybe part of your treatment method there is to dry out your corrosive sludge mixture. And now you've got just some solid bricks that are no longer corrosive. Then that listing will drop off. So you say some treatment methods could do that. Yeah, any point in your generation process, like if you put something in that's ignitable and then it gets mixed with something else, or just through the process in general, it may lose that ignitable listing at the very end. So it's something that I'd say you want to test for, but if it drops off, it drops off. You don't have to worry about it anymore. Not a waste. Not hazardous waste. Sorry. Key point. Okay. Not hazardous waste, still waste.
Thank you, Daniel. Now, another question. Are alcoholic beverages regulated as hazardous waste when they exhibit the characteristic of ignitability?
Okay, so someone decided to take a good look at that that alcohol listing there in the ignitable. So this is again aqueous solutions containing less than 24% alcohol by volume. This is mainly meant to kind of exclude out beverages, if that's what this person may be asking about. So primarily, it's going to be covered under that exclusion there. I think there's also some latex paints that have that as well, that alcohol level lower. But yeah, basically there's, it's not combustible because of the high amount of water also in there. Yeah, don't worry too much about your regular beverages.
Okay. This one's pretty specific. For SW846 method 1311, what are the holding times for the samples?
Okay, so this is some of your sampling methods. This is, I believe, for like leaching. So like if you do a T-clip, your metals are going to give you basically you've got 180 days since you first collect that sample to get it to a lab. In the lab, that 180 days, I believe the lab has another 180 days when determining at their point two. So it's like 360 then in total. So basically, your metals, with the exception of mercury, have a good long hold time. If you're T-clipping for mercury, it's always good that I keep my sampling chart next to me here. That is 28 days from the field to the lab, and then the lab has another 28 days to determine and analyze that. Your volatiles are going to be 14 days, so you don't have too much time there. You want to make sure you are getting them to the lab is quicker, and the labs have another 14 days there for volatiles. So that's your slowest or your quickest, I guess. Got to get on taking the samples and get them out. Semi-volatiles, 14 days to the lab. The lab has 7 days to extract them. That's the only one that has like a specific in process there that labs need to worry about. And then from the labs have another 40 days after that extraction to run their streams, their processes. So in total, you'll have 61 days from the beginning. So let me just run through that for you. You've got volatiles, 14 days to get to the lab, 14 days back from the lab, or for the lab to do their work. Semi-volatiles, 14 days to the lab, 7 days at the lab process for it to extract, 40 days after the extraction to analyze. Mercury is 28 days to the lab, 28 days to analyze at the lab, and your other metals are 180 days to the lab on 180 days for the lab to analyze and get back to you.
Okay, Dan, it looks like we have one more question coming in.
Okay.
Do you have a sampling matrix available to use as a guideline to prevent from over or under analyzing waste streams?
Okay. So I guess we need to know the exact thing you're trying to analyze here. I'm not sure if there is one that I'm aware of over or under analyzing waste streams. I don't want to make too much of an assumption here about what process could be going on. If whoever asked that question, if we can have one of our experts here reach out to them, and we'll try to follow you up more with some email correspondence back and forth so that we get the proper answer for you. I would hate to, again, lead someone down the wrong path.
Okay, thank you, Daniel, and thank you for the great presentation. This is as much time as we have for the questions right now. And thank you to our behind-the-scenes special subject matter experts, Zach, Tammy, and Christy, and to the technical staff for today's presentation. And thank you again to everyone for attending the session, including all of those who are rooting for Ohio teams this weekend. Before we end the session today, we would like to point out to your attention one of today's environmental fun facts. Did you know that Ohio EPA has a summer internship and college scholarship opportunities? Ohio EPA's summer internship program provides students with the opportunity to gain environmental field experience. Interns work directly alongside with Ohio EPA employees who are experts in the environmental field. Up to $5,000 is available to students majoring in environmental science, engineering, or a related field and entering their final year of a degree program at a Ohio college or university in scholarships. You can scan the QR codes on this slide to learn more about both opportunities. And lastly, Ohio EPA hosts a series of webinars throughout the year on a variety of environmental topics. This slide provides information on how to register for these upcoming webinars, where to find recordings of previous webinars, and how to sign up to receive notifications of upcoming webinars through our Ohio EPA Customer Support Center. And with that, we will be ending the session of Ohio EPA's 2022 Virtual Compliance Assistance Conference. We hope you are able to join us for our other conference sessions. Thank you again for joining us, and have a great day.